Two white officers forced a black army major to lie face down on the hood of his SUV while they taunted him, shoved him, and lied into the radio. They didn't care about his uniform, handcuffing him on the side of a Georgia highway. No warnings, no excuses, no Pentagon clearance or medals on his chest. All they saw was a black man in a nice car, and that was enough. They profiled him, humiliated him, beaten, and tried to erase him, but they picked the wrong guy. Jordan West wasn't just another traffic stop. He was a storm waiting to happen. And when he got up, bruised but unbowed, he exposed every lie, every cover-up, every coward hiding behind the badge. That isn't just a story about the abuse of power. It's about what happens when you fight back. One man's protest becomes a national reckoning when the truth is louder than the sirens. If you believe justice isn't just for the privileged, like it. Comment "Justice for Jordan" to show you support him. And subscribe, because we don't just tell stories on this channel, we expose them. Jordan West sits in the driver's seat of his matte black Dodge Durango, the Georgia sun slanting through the windshield and warming the faded tan on his forearms. The military-grade GPS on his dashboard blinks in quiet frustration, recalculating again. Road construction near Fort Mitchell has disrupted the power grid, and even after 22 years of service, Jordan rethinks his country's back roads. Jordan West sat in the driver's seat of his matte black Dodge Durango, the Georgia sun slanting through the windshield and warming the faded bronze skin of his forearm. The military-grade GPS on his dashboard blinked in quiet frustration, recalculating yet again. Road work near Fort Mitchell had scrambled the grid, and even after 22 years in the service, Jordan still found himself second-guessing the back roads of his own country. He wasn't lost, just patient. Rerouting. That's what the screen said. But for men like him, rerouting was more than a machine's command. It was a way of life. 47, still sharp, still built like he could run drills with cadets, but with eyes that had seen too much. The deserts of Kandahar, the frozen quiet of Kosovo, and now, the tight-lipped suspicion of the American South. His fingers tapped a rhythm on the gear shift, a calming trick he'd learned after the first ambush in Iraq. Same tempo. Thumb, index, pinky. It slowed the breath and eased the nerves because men like Jordan didn't get to show nerves. Especially not here. That's when he saw them. Red and blue. In the rear-view mirror, the lights exploded, catching in the dark tint like a warning shot. Jordan's chest didn't tighten. His fingers didn't twitch, he didn't flinch. Instead, Jordan sighed. That long, bone-deep exhale that black men knew too well. The one that said, "Here we go again." He pulled to the shoulder, not hurried, not hesitant, just careful. The hum of traffic faded behind him. Silence settled like fog inside the car. He rolled the window down, placing both hands at 10 and 2. Clean. Empty. Visible. The kind of hand placement fathers passed down was like gospel. His father had taught it to him. Jordan had taught it to his son. Not because it was polite, because it was survival. The officer approached slowly, hands already at the belt. One hovered near the holster. His jaw was clenched tight, a thin sweat catching the edge of his brow despite the shade. "License and registration," he barked. No greeting. No explanation. Jordan's voice came quietly, reaching now. He moved deliberately. No sudden shifts, just enough movement to slide the registration from the glove box and his ID from the visor. Military ID, Department of Defense credentials. Rank, Major, Division, Strategic Command, Clearance, Classified. But Officer Brent Mallory didn't glance at the documents. He didn't need to. He'd already made up his mind. "Step out of the vehicle." Jordan turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing. "I'm not under arrest. Now." A few cars passed. A horn blared. A man leaned out of his Camry with a phone somewhere across the road, filming. Another car slowed. A woman inside pointed and shook her head. But Jordan didn't look at them. He stepped out. The asphalt was hot beneath his boots. He kept his shoulders square, hands still raised, spine erect like he was standing for inspection back on base. His name was Jordan West. His title was Major. But to Officer Mallory, none of that mattered. "You got any weapons?" Mallory asked, circling like a wolf. "No," Jordan said. "My sidearm is locked in the armory. I'm on leave." Mallory smirked. "Military, huh? What are you, janitor on base?" The comment didn't hit. It couldn't. Jordan had heard worse, and had dodged IEDs with less warning. He didn't even blink. "I'm Strategic Command, attached to National Security Liaison." Mallory ignored him, stepping close. "Tint's illegal. Looks like a drug runner's vehicle." "It's legal for military vehicles. I have base registration in the dash." "Didn't ask for a lecture," the cop cut him off. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." The cuffs clicked before Jordan could speak again. And just like that, he was on the hood of his car, the metal hot against his cheek, his face pressing into the dust and sun as if the years he'd served meant nothing. His boots scraped the ground. His shoulders, once adorned with ribbons of valor, now bore the silent weight of humiliation. Across the road, the phones kept filming. Still, Jordan didn't struggle. He didn't curse. He didn't plead. He just waited. Waited with the stillness of a man who knew the difference between panic and power. Because Mallory had made a mistake, not in judgment, but in an assumption. He assumed the man beneath his knee was nobody. But Major Jordan West was not a nobody. He was a call away from reshaping this officer's life. Still, he didn't make that call. Not yet. He let the moment breathe. Let it show itself for what it was. A quiet injustice, laid bare on a Georgia highway under a sky too wide to lie. Mallory fumbled at his waist, radio crackling. "Suspect is non-compliant, possibly impersonating the military. I'm bringing him in. No backup needed." Jordan could hear the shift in the voices of those nearby. A woman asked, "Why are you arresting him?" A man's voice followed. "He wasn't doing anything." But Mallory stayed locked in his own story. One where he was the hero, and the black man in the nice car was the threat. "You think a uniform puts you above the law?" Mallory hissed. "Bet you're one of those diversity hires." Jordan's jaw clenched, not in anger, but in calculation. Then, quietly, like a blade slipping from a sheath, he said, "Officer, you might want to check the name on that ID again." Mallory scoffed. "I know what I saw." "Do you?" Jordan asked, voice low. "Because I think you just handcuffed a man who could call in an entire convoy with one word." For the first time, Mallory hesitated. But Jordan wasn't bluffing. His phone, still tucked in the center console, already had a text queued up. One code, one name. And if he sent it, the sky over Georgia would change. But still, he didn't hit send. Not yet, because the world needed to see this moment for what it was. The moment before the reckoning. The silence before the storm. The stillness before power made itself known. And Jordan West, Major Jordan West, stood at the center of it all, waiting, watching, and choosing very, very carefully when to strike. It wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. It was a fuse, hissing, unseen, leading to a detonation no one was ready for. The cold and impersonal cuffs dug into Major Jordan West's wrists, pressing down like a judgment made before trial. The Georgia pavement beneath his knees still radiated the warmth of late afternoon sun, but the air between him and Officer Brent Mallory had already dropped to ice. Mallory's hand lingered too long on his belt, his stance wide and aggressive, a sneer tugging at the corner of his mouth as he barked into his shoulder mic. Suspect in custody, uncooperative, possibly impersonating military personnel. I'm bringing that guy in. Uncooperative. Jordan bit down hard on his back teeth. The term echoed in his head like a drumbeat of injustice. He hadn't raised his voice and hadn't resisted. His only offense had been in a dark SUV, parked legally, adjusting a GPS outside of Fort Mitchell, on a road he had driven 100 times before. He had followed every rule of survival passed down like gospel between black families: slow movements, calm tone, hands visible, no sudden gestures. And still, it wasn't enough. From across the highway, cameras recorded. Dozens of eyes locked on the unfolding scene. A few voices called out, protests, questions, but no one moved forward. Not yet. Not while the cuffs were on. Not while the man in uniform was treated like a criminal because his presence challenged someone else's perception of power. Mallory was oblivious to the storm he was summoning. The officer tugged Jordan to his feet and shoved him toward the hood of his vehicle. The heat from the metal seared through the fabric of Jordan's uniform. His forehead touched steel. His body burned with the restraint not to break his composure. His silence wasn't surrender. It was the strategy. "You military types," Mallory muttered, patting Jordan down with an edge of cruelty in each swipe. "Always think your little badges mean something out here. Newsflash, they don't." Jordan's jaw clenched, not because of the words, but because of the history behind them. They didn't see the years, the service, the surgeries, the lost brothers in arms, the national briefings, the cold nights in Afghanistan, the round table with NATO, the classified field operations that had protected this very officer's freedom to degrade him on a roadside. Mallory didn't see a soldier. He saw a target. "You think you're above the law, huh? That rank gives you a pass?" The officer's breath smelled of old coffee and something sour. Ego, maybe. "I never said that," Jordan answered, his voice low, controlled, almost clinical. "You didn't have to," Mallory replied, pressing harder on his shoulder. "It's written all over you." And then there was the sound. Distant. Barely there. A subtle rhythmic whoop-whoop that didn't belong to police or traffic. Jordan smiled. Helicopter blades. Not news, not medical. Military. Half a mile up the road, the sleek gray body of a transport chopper breached the tree line. No police markings, no media logos, just matte metal and unmistakable intent. Mallory stiffened. "What the hell is that?" Jordan didn't answer. Another vehicle pulled up. Black SUV, government plate. A woman in a dark suit stepped out before the wheels stopped moving, her heels clicking like a countdown as she approached. Colonel Naomi Cross. 51. Bronze Star. West Point. 5 combat tours. And the kind of presence that could part oceans. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her hand. She simply said, "Release him." Mallory turned, confused. "Excuse me?" "Major Jordan West," she said, every syllable like a blade. "Division Command, Joint Base Andrews. You're detaining a decorated officer on a public road, on pretenses." Mallory looked around. The phones, the cameras, the chopper above, and suddenly the cuffs felt radioactive. I didn't know. That's not an excuse," she interrupted. "It's an indictment." Colonel Cross pulled a key from her pocket, undid the cuffs herself, and handed them back to Mallory with surgical precision. Jordan stood still, dusting off his sleeves as calmly as if he were adjusting for a photo shoot, not recovering from public humiliation. Across the street, one of the bystanders whispered loud enough for the camera mic to catch it. "Holy hell, they just tried to arrest a war hero." Jordan turned slightly toward the voices, then looked up. The helicopter had settled just out of view behind a ridge, but its blades still hummed in the background. A quiet threat, or a reminder that real power didn't need to shout. Mallory stammered. "Look, I was just following procedure. You violated every rule of engagement for a non-hostile civilian encounter," Colonel Cross said. "And you did it on camera. That's not just a mistake. That's a career." Mallory blinked. "I didn't know he was—" "That's the problem," she snapped. "You never bothered to know." Jordan finally spoke. His voice was calm, clear, and loud enough to pierce through the audience of watching phones and trembling consciences. "I've defended this country for nearly 30 years. I've buried friends whose names you wouldn't dare speak without permission. And today, I was treated like a threat because you couldn't imagine someone like me belonging behind that wheel, in that vehicle, in this uniform." He paused. "Tell me, officer, when did service become suspicious?" Silence swallowed the scene. A passing SUV slowed. Its driver, a white man in his 60s, rolled down his window, tapped the horn once, and saluted Jordan with quiet reverence. Jordan didn't return the salute. Not because he didn't appreciate it, but this moment wasn't about optics. It was about truth. Colonel Cross touched his shoulder lightly. "We need to debrief. DC is watching. Command is already spinning." Jordan nodded, but before he turned, he glanced once more at Mallory. The officer's face was pale now, no longer smug, just small. Jordan didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "You thought I was just another man in a dark car." Then he walked away, his shoulders square, his spine unshaken, the hum of the rotor blades like a war drum behind him. And behind him, the country watched. Not just with their eyes, but their conscience. You don't get to silence a man who's earned his voice. Central Jordan West sat in the back of the patrol car, blood trickling down the side of his face, pooling at the collar of his uniform. The tight pinch of the handcuffs cut into his wrists, but he remained still. Not because he wasn't in pain, but because he refused to give the two officers in the front seat the satisfaction of watching him writhe. Officer Travis Bell adjusted the rearview mirror to catch Jordan's eyes. The look was smug, cruel. Bell tilted his head slightly, as if to say, "Now what, old man?" Jordan didn't blink. He just sat there, majestic, silent, waiting. Next to Bell sat Officer Drew Callahan, younger, louder, and meaner. He cracked his knuckles on the steering wheel and laughed. "Man, did you see how he tried to pull rank like that meant something?" he said. "Bet he thought we'd just salute and walk away." Bell smirked. "I don't care who he is. He's just another guy in a truck with tinted windows and too much attitude." "Yeah, another arrogant black guy thinking the world owes him something." Jordan heard every word. Every syllable landed like a slap. Not because he hadn't heard worse, but because they treated him like he was invisible and mistook his silence for surrender. They didn't know he was memorizing their badge numbers, the way Bell's left shoulder dipped just enough when he drove, the way Callahan's fingers tapped twice on the dash whenever he was nervous. Details mattered. Malcolm hadn't spent 30 years navigating war zones and international negotiations to forget the power of information. And this was just another battlefield. But the fury inside him, oh, it was building now. But the fury inside him, oh, it was building now. Not the wild kind. Not the explosive outburst kind. No, this was deeper, sharper. The kind that starts in your bones and rises like heat beneath your skin. It hummed beneath his breath, beneath the blood dripping down his temple. That wasn't the first time he'd tasted injustice. But it tasted this personal for the first time in a long time. Jordan took in his surroundings as they sped down the highway toward the county substation, a 2-lane road. No traffic, woods on either side. It is too far from the main drag for cameras or cell phones to do much good. Strategic. He knew what this was. They were trying to scare him, humiliate him. They didn't know who they'd cuffed. Callahan turned down the radio, the air tense with anticipation. "You think the brass'll cover for this guy?" he asked. Bell shrugged. "Doesn't matter. When anyone figures out who he is, we'll have a nice little resisting arrest charge on file. Toss in obstruction, maybe even a threat on an officer if we need it." Callahan let out a low whistle. "Damn, you got it all mapped out." Bell chuckled. "Been in this game long enough. You gotta write the story before the public does." Jordan's knuckles tightened behind his back. That was it. That was the play. The officers weren't just arresting Malcolm. They were trying to erase his name before anyone could hear his side, fabricating the fall before the truth could rise. Those men still didn't know who they'd cuffed. Malcolm leaned back, voice low and even. "You better make sure your report is airtight," he said, "because every lie you write in there, people who read for a living will tear it apart." Bell snapped his head around. "What was that?" Jordan didn't flinch. "I said, choose your words carefully, officer. Some lies have a half-life. Others explode on impact." Callahan scoffed. "You threatening us?" "No," Jordan said. "I'm warning you." They didn't respond after that, because even they could feel it, that shift in the air. The temperature is rising. When they finally pulled into the station, Bell parked crooked. Too fast, the tires squealing as they stopped. Callahan got out first, slamming the door hard enough to echo. He yanked open the back door and grabbed Jordan by the arm, but the moment he touched him, Jordan turned his head and locked eyes with him. "What's your endgame, officer?" he asked. Callahan sneered. "Endgame? You think cuffing me is going to erase what I've done? What have I earned? Or maybe you're hoping this'll be the story people remember instead of the truth. Either way, you'd better hope this works. Because if it doesn't..." Jordan didn't have to finish the sentence. The silence did it for him. Inside the station, everything was fluorescent and indifferent. The kind of place where stories got rewritten and bruises were called accidental. Where cameras only showed what someone wanted them to see, every form started with a blank box, waiting for an officer to fill it in with something easy to spin. 2 officers escorted Jordan to a processing room. They left the cuffs on. A young officer at the desk glanced up briefly, then did a double take. "Hey, Travis, is this guy military?" the rookie asked. Bell looked annoyed. "Says he is." "Rank?" Jordan answered for him. "Major, retired, West. Serial numbers in your system." The rookie paled. "Sir, I think we need to..." Bell cut him off. "Do your job, rookie." But the rookie was already standing, already reaching for the landline. "I think we've got a problem," he said into the receiver. "This guy's not just military. He's a decorated war hero. Multiple commendations. Diplomatic clearance history. Sir, he's got Pentagon credentials in here." The pause that followed was electric. Bell's face twitched. Callahan stepped back like someone had slapped him. Jordan turned slightly in his chair, the dried blood still clinging to his skin like war paint. "Now you get it," he said softly. The door burst open seconds later. A new figure entered, a woman in a sharp civilian suit with a Department of Defense badge clipped to her lapel. "I'm here for Major Jordan West," she announced. Bell tried to speak. She didn't let him. "You've made a grave error," she said. And the repercussions will be historic. Jordan stood slowly, pain in his side, pressure in his wrists, but his spine remained unshaken. They thought they'd silenced him, but what they'd done was wake a sleeping lion. And now the roar was coming. Jordan West sat in the back of the squad car, wrists bruised, dignity frayed but far from broken. The afternoon sun sliced through the tinted windows, casting streaks across his face, a face that had endured battlefield grit, Pentagon pressure, and political scrutiny, but never humiliation like this. The pain in his shoulders was real. So was the pounding in his head. But what hurt more was the silence that had followed Officer Randall Keene's sneering words. "Thought you could flash a badge and get away, huh?" the officer had growled as he slammed Jordan's face against the hood of his car. "Out here, you're just another mouthy black man who thinks he's special." Jordan hadn't resisted. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't even flinched. But inside, something had broken open. Not in despair, not in fear. In fury. In righteous, slow-burning fury. Because this wasn't the first time he'd seen this pattern play out, but this might be the last time someone thought he wouldn't fight back. The car rolled through East Fulton traffic, sirens off, like this was some quiet administrative detainment. Jordan could see pedestrians turning their heads. No one knew who he was yet. To them, he was just another cuffed black man in a cruiser. And for the moment, that's how Officer Keene preferred it. "Should have stayed in whatever base you crawled out of," the officer muttered from the front. His partner, a younger cop named Ellis, didn't say much, just chewed his gum and gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly. Jordan remained still, but his voice was steady as granite. "You realize what you've done," he said. "Isn't just illegal. It's historic." Keene chuckled, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "Oh yeah? Are you going to write a strongly worded letter?" "No," Jordan replied, calm like thunder in the distance. "I made a call." Keene's smirk twitched. "To whom? Your girlfriend? Your lawyer?" "To the Joint Chiefs," Jordan said plainly. "One of them answers when I call. Always has." And there it was, the first flicker of unease on Keene's face. Jordan didn't need threats. He had facts. And the truth, when appropriately wielded, cuts deeper than a baton ever could. The cruiser pulled into the downtown station. Gray brick, outdated metal signage, and a lobby that smelled like burnt coffee and sour authority. Jordan stepped out, still cuffed, and stood tall. His back ached. His wrists throbbed. But his spine? It held firm. The desk sergeant glanced up, clearly uninterested, until Jordan spoke. "Major Jordan West, serial 273518, detained without cause by Officer Randall Keene. I am not under arrest. I demand immediate contact with the Defense Department." The sergeant blinked. Keene cut in fast. "Ignore him, military nut. Tried to fake ID." Jordan turned toward the security camera above the desk and repeated his name. This time, slower, more precise. "Major Jordan West, active duty. 3 combat tours. Commendations from 2 presidents. I will contact the Inspector General, the Secretary of Defense, and the media. And when I do, this department's name will be the headline." The room chilled. The sergeant paused. Then, reaching under the counter, he pressed a silent call button. 30 minutes later, Jordan was in a holding room. The door locked. The lights flickered overhead. But he wasn't alone anymore. Because across the country, the fuse he'd lit had already reached the powder keg. Colonel Diane Sloan had received the call, and she was already en route. At Fort Benning, Lieutenant Commander Ray Carter was watching the video that had just surfaced. Grainy footage from a bystander across the street, showing Jordan's arrest. No context needed. Just the image of a decorated black officer being yanked from his car like a suspect in a robbery gone bad. "This is going viral," someone said behind him. "We should prep a statement." "No," Carter replied, cold. "We prep an intervention." Meanwhile, at the station, Keene and Ellis reviewed the footage themselves. Only now, the tone had shifted. "Think we screwed up?" Ellis asked nervously. Keene shrugged, but his hands were shaking. "You see how many people are retweeting this?" Ellis pressed. "They're calling him a hero. And us." The door burst open. Deputy Chief Melissa Tanaka stood in the frame, her face like stone. "Who the hell authorized this arrest?" she snapped. Keene stumbled forward. "He was non-compliant, said he was military, but didn't show proof." "He did show proof," Tanaka snapped, holding up Jordan's ID. "Which he offered before you put a knee in his back. You assaulted a major in the United States Army." Silence. No charges, no cause. And now? Her voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Now we have a media firestorm, a legal disaster, and Washington, D.C. on the line." Keene opened his mouth. Tanaka cut him off. "Shut it, you're suspended, effective immediately. Ellis, hand over your badge. Both of you, get out." Jordan was released minutes later. Tanaka met him personally, extending a quiet apology, but he didn't shake her hand. "Apology isn't policy," he said, "and policy is the only thing that prevents the next me." She nodded. "We're already drafting internal reforms." "I want that in writing," he said. "I want every officer in this department to watch that footage and understand why you're rewriting your handbook." "You'll have it," she promised. But Jordan wasn't finished. "I'm not doing this in silence," he said. "I want a press conference. I want this story told by me, not filtered through PR spin." She agreed. And as he stepped outside, the crowd across the street erupted, not in applause, but in something more profound. Recognition. Not just of what had happened, but of who he was. Major Jordan West. Not just another black man with cuffs on his wrists. A decorated soldier, a man of rank. And now, a symbol of what happens when power is misused, and when it is finally, rightfully held accountable. The hum of the precinct was deceptively calm. Phones rang, printers spat out paperwork, and the occasional bark of orders echoed from behind glass doors. But the energy was off. An undercurrent of static tension, like the pause before a dam burst. Central Jordan West sat still on the metal bench of the holding cell, wrists aching from the too tight cuffs, blood dried along the side of his temple, where Officer Clark's baton had split the skin. The dull overhead light flickered every few seconds, casting twitching shadows across the floor. But Jordan's mind wasn't on the pain. It was focused, sharpened, waiting. He'd made the call, and they had no idea what that meant. Outside the cell, Officer Ron Clark paced, jaw tight, trying to keep up appearances as the walls started to shift around him. He could feel it. The silence. The eyes. Colleagues who wouldn't meet his gaze. The sergeant at the front desk wouldn't speak more than 3 words to him. Something had changed. He just didn't know what. Until the door swung open, Captain Lila Stone strode in, heels sharp against the linoleum. Not from this precinct. Not even from this state. She was with the Department of the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, CID, and her badge had more weight than anything in this room. "Where is he?" she said, her voice a clean, efficient slice of command. Clark stiffened. "We have a suspect in holding—" "Major Jordan West is not a suspect," she interrupted. "He is a decorated officer, and unless you want to find yourself at the center of a federal obstruction case, you'll uncuff him. Now." Clark's lips twitched. "I'm not authorized to release him." Captain Stone didn't wait. She pulled out a folded document and tossed it onto the front desk. "You are now." Sergeant Harlan picked it up and paled. The signature at the bottom wasn't just a name, but a force of nature. Brigadier General Angela Raines, CID, Judge Advocate General's Corps. The army wasn't playing politics. They were bringing thunder. Jordan raised his head back in the holding cell as the door creaked open. "You all right, sir?" Captain Stone asked, stepping in with a calmness that came from decades in the storm. Jordan gave a nod. "Better now." She unlocked the cuffs herself. No hesitation, no protocol review, just action. She glanced at the wounds on Jordan's face, the torn uniform, the dried blood. Her jaw tensed, but she said nothing. Not yet. Officer Clark appeared in the hallway just as they exited the cell. "He was resisting," he said, eyes defiant, still clinging to the script he'd convinced himself was real. "No," Captain Stone said, turning to face him. "He was standing. Something you've never done for anyone who looks like him." She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her words echoed louder than a siren. The next 30 minutes moved fast. Too fast for Clark to keep up. Jordan emerged from the precinct flanked by military personnel. 3 camera crews had gathered when they reached the black SUV, idling at the curb. The footage from the cell had leaked. The bruises, the cuffs, the blood. It was already online, and it was everywhere. Inside the SUV, Jordan sat silent as the city blurred past. Captain Stone scrolled through her tablet, reading updates from the Army's legal division and military public affairs teams. The Pentagon was on fire. Congress was calling. Major Jordan West had become the center of a snowstorm, no longer local. It was national. It was personal. "We've got the footage from the bystander across the street," Stone said. "Clean angles, full audio. We've also got surveillance from the base confirming the vehicle is registered in your name, with military clearance. The tinted windows? Legal." Jordan chuckled softly, though his ribs protested. "They'll still find a way to spin it." Stone looked at him. "Not this time." Outside the base gates, protesters had gathered. Not just military families, veterans, students, faith leaders, and community organizers. Signs held high. He served, they abused. "Major West, we stand with you. You don't silence soldiers." Jordan watched the crowd as they passed, his throat tightening. He hadn't asked for this spotlight and hadn't wanted it. But now, the moment demanded it. They reached the operations center. It was already war room mode. Screens glowed with live feeds. News anchors dissected every second of the arrest. Political analysts debated institutional racism in law enforcement. Retired generals gave testimonials about Jordan's career, integrity, and sacrifice. And in the center of it all, Brigadier General Angela Raines stood tall, arms crossed, eyes burning with fury barely contained. She turned as Jordan entered. "You look like hell," she said. He smiled. "You should see the other guy." But the humor faded quickly. General Raines stepped forward, her voice dropping. "This was supposed to be a routine route back to the base. You stopped for 10 minutes to recalibrate the GPS, and now you're a national headline." Jordan nodded. "I was never just stopped. I was profiled." Silence. Then Raines replied, "Well, now they're going to learn what happens when you profile a soldier with stars behind him." She turned to the table. "They want a statement. You up for it?" Jordan's jaw clenched. "Yes." He stepped up to the podium at the back of the room. Cameras were live. Social media is already exploding. He didn't speak from a script. He didn't need one. "My name is Major Jordan West. I am a U.S. Army officer. I have served this country on 5 continents. I have lost friends in combat. I have buried brothers in arms. And yesterday I was treated like a threat. On my soil, in my uniform." He paused, letting that settle. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't resist. I did everything I've trained others to do under pressure. And still I was humiliated. Still, I bled, a breath measured. This isn't just about me." It's about every black man who's been told they don't belong. About every service member who comes home and finds the flag they fought for doesn't always fight for them. He looked up, eyes locked on the cameras. But I'm not backing down. I'm not angry. I'm not broken. I'm ready. The feed went viral before he stepped away from the mic. That night, Officer Ron Clark was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 2 internal affairs officers were already at his apartment when the 11 p.m. news aired. He didn't sleep. Across the city, families watched Jordan's statement at dinner tables, on smartphones, and in classrooms the next day. It wasn't just a press conference, it was a shift, a rupture in the narrative. Momentum had broken loose, and it was just getting started. The hearing room buzzed with restrained tension. A week had passed since the footage of Major Jordan West being arrested had made its way across every social media platform, morning news segment, and congressional inbox in America. The man who once preferred the quiet dignity of serving in the shadows was now a symbol, whether he wanted to be. Jordan stood at the far end of the hallway inside the State Civil Review Commission building in downtown Atlanta. He wasn't in uniform this time. Today, he wore a dark navy suit, a quiet statement of formality and focus. His injuries had healed just enough to hide under tailored fabric, at least the physical ones. His attorney, Amira Patel, stood by his side, sharp as steel and calm as a surgeon. She reviewed her notes with quiet confidence, while murmurs echoed from the other end of the hallway. Reporters, civilians, and activists had packed the building. Their presence wasn't accidental. It was intentional. Because today wasn't just about one man's arrest. It was about a system that had long operated in the dark, and today the floodlights had turned on. The doors to the commission chamber opened. A bailiff gestured for them to enter. The room was filled. Rows of benches lined with people who had followed the story from day one. Families, retired service members, students, local officials, even a few off-duty police officers who had quietly expressed support but knew better than to speak too loudly. At the center sat the review board, a panel of 6, 3 civilians, 2 law enforcement veterans, and 1 former federal judge. Their eyes were heavy with the weight of what today could mean. Jordan sat at the front, just to the right of the podium. Across from him sat Officer Darren Holcomb, the man whose name was now synonymous with wrongful arrest and abuse of power. Holcomb wore his uniform today, but it sagged on him, like the weight of scrutiny had pressed out whatever swagger had once filled it. He didn't meet Jordan's eyes. Not yet. The hearing began with formalities, statements from the chair, introductions, and a brief outline of the procedures. But no one came for the process. They went for the reckoning. And it started the moment they hit play. A giant screen lit up on the side wall. The dashcam footage began to roll, synced with the body cam audio. It was the same clip that had gone viral, but this time it was slowed, analyzed, and paused frame by frame. There was Major Jordan West, calm, composed, sitting in his car. There was Holcomb, hand on his weapon before a single word was spoken. There was the cuffing, the unnecessary force, the smug declaration of authority. And then, the silence that followed when Jordan's name was finally uttered. Major Jordan West. When the clip ended, the silence in the room felt different from the one that began. This silence wasn't confusion. It was clarity, heavy and undeniable. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Major West, you may speak. Jordan stood slowly. Jordan didn't raise his voice. He didn't thump his chest. He didn't have to. My name is Major Jordan West, he said, his voice steady as a sunrise. I have served this country for 26 years. I've bled in lands most Americans can't find on a map. I've buried friends in flag-draped coffins, and I've worn this nation's uniform with more pride than I can explain. But on June 3rd, 2025, I was reduced to a suspect before I could speak my name. He let the weight of those words settle before continuing. I wasn't mistaken for a criminal because of something I did. I was targeted because of something I am. And that should scare every single person in this room. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others clenched their fists. Holcomb shifted in his chair, his discomfort finally visible. "But I'm not here to demand revenge," Jordan continued. "I'm here to demand honesty. This isn't about one bad cop. It's about a culture that protects him, that excuses him, that trains him to see difference as danger." His eyes swept across the panel. "Today is your opportunity. Not to vindicate me. I don't need that. I know who I am. But to send a message that accountability matters more than reputation. That power without humility is a danger to all of us." He returned to his seat, the room holding its breath. Amira placed a quiet hand on his shoulder. Behind them, a dozen people stood in silent support. No signs, no shouts, just presence. The board opened the floor to public testimony. A teacher spoke first. She described using Jordan's story in her civics class to teach kids what courage looked like. A nurse followed, crying about her brother, who hadn't been lucky to walk away from his traffic stop. Then came Sergeant Malik Rhodes, who was on active duty in the Army. He took the stand in uniform, his chest heavy with service ribbons. "Major West is who I looked up to when I was just a recruit," he said. "If it can happen to him, what chance do the rest of us have?" When Officer Holcomb was finally called, he hesitated before rising. His face was pale now, stripped of defiance. I made a mistake," he said, voice uneven. "I didn't know who he was." Someone in the audience whispered, "But you knew what he looked like." A few heads nodded. The chairwoman didn't react. "Do you believe race played a role in your decision that day?" Holcomb paused. Too long. I can't say." "You just did," she replied. By the time the hearing adjourned, no gavel was needed. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. As Jordan exited the building, reporters surged forward. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. He raised one hand, fingers closed in a fist, not clenched in anger, but held steady in quiet defiance. And that image, the black man in a navy suit, framed by cameras, his past and future in balance, that image traveled faster than any headline. Across town, Officer Holcomb was placed on administrative leave, pending termination. And in D.C., when a congresswoman submitted a bill proposal, the West Protocol. A nationwide reform package addressing bias training, police accountability, and the codification of military-civilian protections in law enforcement interactions. Central Jordan West had lit the match. And now, the reckoning had begun. Jordan West couldn't sleep. The sterile fluorescent light above his bunk flickered for the third time that hour, buzzing softly like a warning he couldn't decipher. His bandaged ribs ached with every breath, but that wasn't what kept him awake. It was the feeling in his gut, like standing too close to a tripwire, one foot already hovering in air, knowing the next step would detonate everything. Across the room, Jamal lay asleep on the cot, his arm bruised, one eye swollen from the attack in the parking garage. They'd come after Jordan's family now. That wasn't just a message, it was a declaration of war. The TV mounted on the wall looped the duplicate, sanitized headlines. Suspect in uniform. Major or menace? But under the surface, something darker churned. Jordan had felt it during his years in covert operations overseas. How the air tightened just before a coup. how silence became a weapon when truth was being buried. He sat up slowly, ignoring the pull in his side, and turned the volume up one notch. No official charges filed yet, but sources within Kingsfield PD suggest further inquiry into West's conduct during the detainment. Meanwhile, protests outside the courthouse continue to grow. Jordan turned it back down. Noise. He needed clarity. And clarity, in his experience, only came when you pressed back harder than the threat. There was a knock on the door. He stood slowly, instinctively grabbing the metal cane he'd been issued after the bruised rib incident. He didn't need it for support. He needed it for presence. He opened the door a crack. Maya Torres stood outside, her blazer soaked at the shoulders, eyes blazing despite the storm behind her. "We need to talk," she said. "Now." So Jordan let her in, and she moved fast, dropping a manila folder on the table. She didn't bother sitting. "They just moved Officer Leary to Internal Affairs," she said, pacing. "And guess who's handling the review? Captain Vernon Stokes, Drayton's golfing buddy, and the same man who denied your security clearance 6 years ago because of a personality conflict." Jordan didn't respond immediately. He opened the folder. Photos, surveillance stills, documents with redacted names and blurry timestamps. "What is this?" he asked. "It's leverage," Maya said. "The footage of your arrest has been doctored. Someone inside the department blurred your ID badge and cut the audio when you stated your rank." Jordan's jaw tightened. "And the originals?" "Gone," she said. "Deleted off the cruiser's hard drive. That doesn't happen unless someone high up orders it." His fist clenched. "They're erasing my rank, my record, everything." Maya nodded. "They're rewriting the story, and if we don't hit back now, they will write the ending too." Just then, Jamal stirred. He sat up, groggy, and blinked toward the two of them. "You're going to need proof," he mumbled. "And you're not going to find it in that building." Jordan looked at his nephew. "Then where?" Jamal glanced at the clock on the wall. "The impound lot. That's where my car is, and it has a dash cam. I haven't touched it since you picked me up that night." Maya's eyes lit up. "If that camera caught anything, we could cross-reference the timeline. If we find inconsistencies..." Jordan was already moving. "Then we prove tampering. We make it public. We force their hand." But before they could take another step, a low rumble shook the floor beneath them. "What was that?" Jamal asked. Then the lights cut out. All three froze. Rain battered the window like fists. A second boom echoed from the alley behind the building, this time unmistakably the crack of gunfire. Jordan moved first, yanking Jamal to the floor and pulling Maya behind the couch. "We're being targeted," he said, calm but sharp. "They're not waiting anymore." A second bullet struck the frame of the window. Maya scrambled for her phone, already dialing. "Emergency backup. Secure line. Code Zulu 17. Jordan looked to Jamal. "Get ready to run. We're not dying in this damn safe house." Footsteps pounded outside. Military boots, not standard police issue. He could tell by their weight. These weren't uniforms. They were mercenaries. Off-the-books muscle hired to clean up a mess. "We need to move now," Jordan shouted. Maya nodded. "Rear exit's clear. I checked it coming in." Jordan threw open the back door, rain hitting him like a wall. They darted into the alley, sprinting toward the streetlights in the distance. Jamal slipped on the wet pavement, but Jordan yanked him up with one hand. Behind them, the safe house exploded. The concussion threw them forward, fire licking the edge of the sky. Windows shattered 2 blocks over. Maya's coat caught an ember, but patted it down with her palm. They didn't stop running until they reached the next block, where an unmarked black SUV screeched to a halt. Reed. The DOJ officer stepped out, hair soaked, eyes wide. "Jesus Christ, are you all right?" he shouted. "They tried to kill us," Maya said. "Blew the safe house to hell." Reed threw open the back door. "Get in," We're not safe on the street." Inside the car, Jordan caught his breath. His lungs burned. His ribs screamed. But he was alive. And now, so was the story. "They escalated," Maya said, glancing at him. "They made it clear." Jordan nodded. "And now we return the favor." Reed turned to him. "You're not just a case file anymore, Major. They just turned you into a symbol." Jordan looked out the window, watching the flames flicker behind them. "Then let's give them something worth fearing." The cold press of the gavel still echoed in the back of Major Jordan West's mind as the courthouse emptied, a sea of reporters and cameras buzzing just beyond the marble pillars. Inside, the air was thick with resolution. Outside, it was something else entirely. Fire, fury, confusion. The verdict had landed like a thunderclap. Guilty. Officer Darren Klein and Sergeant Rick Jorgensen, the two men who had profiled, brutalized, and tried to destroy Jordan's life, were convicted on all charges: assault under color of authority, falsification of evidence, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom had held its breath as the jury foreperson read each count. And yet, as the verdict was announced, Jordan didn't feel the relief others expected. There was no exhale, no smile, because triumph never comes unscarred. He stepped into the hallway, the walls lined with activists, military peers, journalists, and students holding up hand-drawn signs that read, "West Point, West Strong." Others simply held candles, silent, watching. "Major West?" a voice called, steady and clear. Since the trial began, Miguel Santos, now promoted to lieutenant colonel, had become one of Jordan's staunchest allies. "They want you on the steps, the people. They want to hear from you." Jordan gave a slow nod. The kind of nod you provide when you're running on fumes, but know there's one more mile to walk. He emerged into the light, not with fanfare, but with purpose. The air was thick with chants, phones raised high, hashtags already trending live. The crowd surged like a tide, but it parted as he stepped onto the stone steps. He stood before them, tired, bruised, but unbroken. His uniform pressed, his medals gleaming against the fading orange of sunset. "I didn't choose this fight," he began, voice raw but unwavering. "It found me, as it's found so many who look like me. But I chose not to run from it, and neither should any of you." A wave of cheers rippled through the crowd, but his face remained still. "They told me justice would come in time," he continued. "But time means nothing if those who abuse power get to write the first draft of history. Today, we corrected that draft, but it's not finished." As he stepped down, flashes erupted, camera bulbs, media vans rolling live, but he didn't stop to speak. Not to reporters, not to commentators. His voice had been heard. And now, more than anything, he needed quiet. Back in the green room of the courthouse, Jordan sat alone. Miguel entered after a moment, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You good?" Miguel asked, offering one. Jordan took it, but didn't drink. "They're in prison, but it doesn't undo what they did to me. Doesn't unframe the moment I was pinned down like a criminal. Doesn't rewrite the headlines. Doesn't tell the lie." Miguel sat beside him. "You made history today. You pulled something righteous from something evil." Jordan finally took a sip. Bitter. Fitting. "I kept thinking it would feel like victory," he admitted. "But it feels like survival. Just survival." Miguel nodded, understanding. "Sometimes surviving is the loudest victory of all." Across town, Captain Darren Klein was being escorted to a federal holding facility, his once proud shoulders now slouched beneath orange scrubs. He didn't speak to the press, didn't protest the verdict. Maybe he knew there were no words left. But someone else wasn't so quiet. From the shadows of a corporate law office in D.C., a new threat stirred. Julian Grayson, civilian, political strategist, former Deputy Undersecretary to the Secretary of Defense. The man whose fingerprints had barely graced the case, yet whose influence had shaped every legal obstacle Jordan faced. Grayson had watched the trial with tight lips and colder eyes. And when the guilty verdicts were handed down, he didn't panic. He pivoted. "We lost the public stage," he told his assistant, tossing a manila folder on the table. "So we take the private one." Inside the folder? A surveillance photo of Jordan's niece, Simone, walking home from high school. Back at Jordan's temporary residence, Simone was quiet. She'd watched her uncle testify. She'd seen the trial's darkest moments play out on live television, and yet she still wore his army hoodie with pride. Jordan saw her across the room, curled up in an armchair, earbuds in, watching something on her tablet. He stepped closer. It was footage of his press conference. "You okay?" he asked gently. She took one earbud out. "They didn't break you." "No," he replied, kneeling beside her. "But they tried." She looked down. "Will it ever stop? The threats? The hate?" He took her hand. "Maybe not. But that's why we fight. Not for the win. For the next breath. For the next kid who wears a hoodie like this and doesn't get profiled." That night, a brick was thrown through the window of Jordan's rental. No note. Just a silent message. A warning. The bitter aftertaste of a public victory. The FBI was called. The surveillance footage was reviewed. No ID, no fingerprints. Just darkness moving through darker corners. The triumph triggered another wave. And still, the calls came in. From colleges. From veterans groups. From congressmen and women who once distanced themselves and wanted proximity to his spotlight. But Jordan didn't feel like a symbol. He felt like a man still standing in the crosshairs. The following day, Evelyn Drake, his attorney, advocate, and friend, sat with him at a diner. Her blazer was immaculate. Her tone was pointed. "They're already trying to rewrite this," she said, scrolling through headlines. "Some pundits are calling it an overcorrection. Others claim it was a media stunt." Jordan sighed. "So what do we do?" She leaned forward. "We do what you've always done. We stand taller. We speak louder. We push harder." And then she handed him a letter. "What's this?" he asked. "A nomination," she said with a flicker of pride. "The Congressional Medal of Honor, first ever for a domestic act of civic courage." Jordan stared at the paper, the ink still fresh. It felt heavy in his hands. Real. But still, bittersweet. He had survived. He had won. But it didn't feel like the end. Victory like his always comes at a cost. The night was thick with rain and remembrance. Central Jordan West stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, the granite beneath his boots slick from a sudden spring downpour. Around him, a vigil gathered. Hundreds, maybe thousands, stood shoulder to shoulder, holding candles, flags, and signs. Some wore army green. Others wore hoodies with West Point. West Strong, stenciled across the front in bold white lettering. All of them carried the same fire in their eyes. Behind Jordan, the memorial's pillars stretched toward the sky, silent sentinels of a nation's promises. And in front of him, the people waited, watching, listening, hoping. The government had tried to spin it. After the convictions of Officers Klein and Jorgensen, public pressure only intensified. Julian Grayson, the shadowy puppet master behind the curtain, had vanished, disavowed by his allies, erased from official logs. The brick thrown through Jordan's window had been the first warning. The second came days later. An anonymous, unsigned letter with one sentence scrawled in red ink. "You may have won, but you won't last." That threat didn't break Jordan. It clarified him. Because legacy isn't built in ease, it's forged in fire. Now he wasn't just a soldier, survivor, or even a symbol on these steps. He was standing as a man who'd been bent, but not broken. Someone who had seen a system's dark underbelly and dared to fight back. He stepped up to the microphone, rain pattering gently on his shoulders, mixing with the gold of his epaulets and the weight of the past months. "I was raised to believe that courage was something loud," he began, his voice steady. "Something found in battle cries and raised fists. But I've learned it can also be quiet, found in the stillness of holding your ground when the world wants you to shrink." A hush fell across the crowd. The candles flickered like stars suspended in human hands. "Many of you have followed my story," he continued. "You've seen the footage, you've read the headlines, you've watched the trial. But what you haven't seen, what no camera can capture, is the ache that follows victory. The loneliness of being the one who lived to tell the story when so many others didn't." He looked down at his hands, scarred, calloused, steady. "This isn't about one man. This is about a system that's been asked politely to change and has consistently responded brutally. This is about people tired of asking, waiting, and bleeding." Applause rose, then fell. Respectful. Solemn. In the front row, Evelyn Drake stood with Simone, Jordan's niece, now taller and prouder than ever. She wore her uncle's army jacket over her shoulders, sleeves too long, but she didn't notice. Miguel Santos stood beside her, flanked by military officers, students, community organizers, all drawn together by something more significant than rank. "2 days ago," Jordan said, "I declined a Medal of Honor nomination." The crowd gasped softly. Simone's eyes widened. "Not because I didn't appreciate it," he said, "but because it wasn't mine alone. That medal belongs to the boy in Ohio who never made it to trial, the woman in Baltimore whose story was buried beneath bureaucracy. It belongs to every family that had to whisper their grief so they wouldn't seem angry." He paused. "I don't want a medal. I want change." The crowd roared now, not with rage but with resolve. Jordan looked out over the sea of faces. "So here's what comes next. Tomorrow, we launch the West Initiative, legislation drafted by leaders across the aisle, anchored in accountability. Nationwide civilian review boards, federal military verification protocols, national body cam access laws. If departments want funding, they must earn trust." A young man shouted from behind, "We've got your back, Major." Jordan smiled, just faintly. "I didn't survive that traffic stop, that beating, that smear campaign to stand here and ask for sympathy. I came here to make sure no one has to survive what I did ever again." From the side of the stage, Evelyn raised a fist. The crowd followed, hands lifted toward the sky, united in silence, then in thunderous applause. Jordan stepped back. He was tired. His ribs still ached. The scar near his temple from Klein's elbow would never fully fade. But he had walked through fire and had come out carrying something indestructible. Purpose. Later that night, back at Simone's house, the news was on every screen. Commentators called his speech the Gettysburg of our generation. Hashtags flooded social media. West won. Justice was served. The system blinked. He turned off the TV. "Still don't like hearing your voice?" Simone teased. He chuckled. "I prefer actions." "Good," she said, reaching into her backpack. She pulled out a crisp, college-bound blue folder with a bold gold seal. "Because I just submitted my early application to West Point." Jordan froze. Simone smiled. "Thought maybe it was time I stopped watching from the sidelines." Emotion crashed into him harder than any headline. "Your father, my brother, he would be proud," Jordan said softly. "I know," she whispered. The house fell quiet, until a knock at the door broke it. Evelyn stood on the other side, flanked by 2 men in suits, FBI agents. Their faces were serious. Their postures are tense. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside. "Grayson's not gone. We traced a recent transfer from an offshore account linked to his shell firm. He's building something new, quiet, dangerous." Jordan sighed, but there was no fear in his eyes, only focus. "Then we go again," he said, rolling his sleeves. Evelyn nodded. "You ready?" He looked at Simone, at the framed photo of his brother in uniform, then at the open window, where the wind carried the scent of something burned, yet rising anew. "No," he said. "I'm not just ready. I'm relentless." Major Jordan West, a veteran, a Pentagon liaison, a man who had spent nearly 3 decades honorably serving this country, was thrown into his SUV, handcuffed, insulted, and beaten. Not because he posed a threat, not because he broke the law, but because he was a black man in a dark-colored car. They didn't see his medals. They didn't ask about his service. They didn't care that he wore a flag on his sleeve while others hid behind it. To them, he was just another suspect, another talkative black guy. And so they humiliated him. They lied in their reports. They erased his credentials from the body-worn camera footage. And when that wasn't enough, they tried to burn the truth. They bombed his safe house. They wounded his nephew. They tried to kill him. But Jordan West did not yield. He did not run. He did not fear. He stood up. And so the system was shaken. Officers were fired, indicted, exposed. A judge lost his seat. A dark web of political activity began to unravel. And a nation that usually turns the pages on stories like his? I was forced to read every word. But the part that angers you, it should never have gotten this far. If outsiders hadn't filmed, if journalists hadn't dug, this story would have ended in silence if Jordan hadn't had the rank, fame, and resources, like so many others. So what are we to do about it? We stop pretending that this is rare. We stop hoping that someone else will speak up. And we start showing up, for Jordan, and for every name the headlines left out. This story is about more than just one man's pain. It's about the power of exposure, the necessity of outrage, and the cost of silence. Here's what you can do right now. Like to show your support for Major West. Comment below, "Justice for Jordan," if you believe this fight is far from over. Share this video so no one forgets what they did, and what it took to stop it. Subscribe to this channel to stay updated on stories like this, stories they hope you'll remember. Because if we let this moment pass, they will do it again. For someone else's uncle, someone else's daughter, someone else's future. But if we stand up, if we listen, learn, and act, they will know that this country doesn't just belong to those in power. It belongs to all of us. What about Major Jordan West? He's not just a man, he's a line. Let's make sure they never cross that line again. Sign up, share, speak up. The next chapter of justice starts with you.